Hi there, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's February 18th. Today, we celebrate a man who wrote one of the most influential herbals in history and the French botanist who created the modern strawberry. We'll learn about the father of paleobotany and the sweet little orchid known as the moccasin flower. Today's unearthed words feature words about winter. And we grow that garden library with the diary of a fabulous nurserywoman and garden designer. I'll talk about a garden item to get hung up on, and then we'll wrap things up with the fascinating birth flowers for the month of February. But first, I just want to say thanks to all of you who have sent your well wishes to me. I was in a bad car accident on Monday night. I'm doing much better, and thankfully, no one was seriously hurt, which is always the most important thing. Here's today's curated articles. First up is an article from JSTOR Daily. They're featuring their February plant of the month, the sensitive plant. JSTOR is a digital library for scholars, researchers, and students. I love the sensitive plant. Whenever you touch it, the leaves fold up like a fan along its stem. JSTOR's article says, at first glance, Mimosa pudica is a plant that most people would consider a weed. It grows close to the ground with countless delicate leaflets, puffy pinkish balls of flowers, and small bunches of legumes. So it makes sense that the Mimosa pudica would be known as the humble plant. But what about its association with other names like the herb of love or the sensitive plant? Well, according to the botanist John Lindley, the humble plant had been introduced from its native Brazil to every part of the world, not only for its beauty, but for its curious sensibility. In response to certain stimuli, the many small leaflets and leaves of Mimosa pudica rapidly fold in on each other. When Linnaeus considered what separated the living from non living things, he famously wrote, "Stones grow, plants grow and live, animals grow, live, and feel." With the mimosa's apparent ability to feel, many people questioned whether the sensitive plant took on animal characteristics with its strong reaction to touch. The sensitive plant fascinated 18th century botanists, scientists, and poets who often compared the plant to animals because of the reaction of the plant contracting after being touched. Erasmus Darwin wrote about the sensitive plant in a poem called The Botanic Garden. Here's what he wrote. Weak with nice sense, this chaste mimosa stands. From each rude touch, withdraws her timid hands. Oft as light clouds overpass the summer glade, and feels, alive through all her tender form, the whispered murmurs of the gathering storm, shuts her sweet eyelids to the approaching night, and hails with freshened charms the rising light. If you'd like to check out JSTOR's article on the plant of the month, the sensitive plant, just search for the word sensitive the next time you're in the Facebook group for the show, and this post will pop right up. Then next up is a post from Gardening Know-How. The title caught my attention because it says Honey Plant Growth Stimulator, using honey to root cuttings. Here's an excerpt. Many people have found success with using honey to root cuttings. It is, after all, a natural antiseptic and contains antifungal properties, allowing the little cuttings to remain healthy and strong. Some people have even added honey to willow water to aid in rooting. I really liked this little article from Gardening Know How. It's a great topic for this time of year as people are trying to root all different kinds of houseplants. If you'd like to check out this post for yourself in the Facebook group for the show, just search for the word honey, and this post will pop up. Now, if you'd like to join the Facebook group for the show, the listener community, all you have to do is the next time you're in Facebook, head on up to the search bar, type in the Daily Gardener community, and request to join. Then I'll get a notification on my phone and I'll admit you into the group. It's just that easy. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of Valerius Cordus, who was born on this day in 1515. Cordus was the author of one of the most influential herbals in history. In fact, centuries later, the botanist Thomas Archibald Spragg republished the Herbal of Valerius Cordus with his older sister, who he considered to be the best botanist in his family of botanists. And when the book published, Sprague gifted her with a personal and gorgeous bound copy, and he had the book dedicated to her in Latin, basically thanking her for all that she had taught him and for collaborating with him. Now, as for Valerius Cordus, he died young at the age of 29. He'd contracted malaria. In 1544, Valerius had spent the summer botanizing in Italy with two French naturalists. At some point, he had waded into the marshes in search of new plants. When he became sick a short time later, his friends brought him to Rome, and then they continued on to Naples. When they returned for him, they found their friend Valerius had died. We owe a debt of gratitude to the Swiss botanist Conrad Gesner, who had the sense to collect Valerius Cordus's prolific writings and to preserve and publish them. One expert once said, "There was Theophrastus, then there was nothing for 1800 years. Then there was Cordus." The genus Cordia is named in honor of Valerius Cordus. Cordias are in the borage family, and many cordias have fragrant, showy flowers. And some cordias produce edible fruits with strange and fascinating names like clammy cherries, glueberries, sebestin, or snotty gobbles. And today is the anniversary of the death of the French botanist, gardener, and professor at Versailles, Antoine Nicolas Duchesne, who died on this day in 1827. A specialist in strawberries and gourds, Duchesne was a student of Bernard Jussieu at the Royal Garden in Paris. A plant pioneer, Duchesne recognized that mutation was a natural occurrence and that plants could be altered through mutation at any time. As a young botanist, Duchesne began experimenting with strawberries. Ever since the 1300s, wild strawberries had been incorporated into gardens. But on July 6, 1764, Duchesne created the modern strawberry, the strawberry we know and love today. Strawberries are members of the rose family, and their seeds are on the outside of the fruit. Just how many seeds are on a single strawberry? Well, the average strawberry has around 200 seeds. Now, to get your strawberry plants to produce more fruit, plant them in full sun in well drained soil and trim the runners. And today is the anniversary of the death of the French botanist and the father of paleobotany, Adolphe Theodore Brongniart, who died on this day in 1873. Adolphe Theodore and his wife had two sons, and when Adolphe Theodore died on this day, he died in the arms of his eldest boy. As one of the most prominent botanists of the 19th century, Adolphe Theodore worked to classify fossil plant forms, and he did so even before Charles Darwin. Adolphe Theodore's work provided content for his book on the history of fossil plants in 1828. Adolphe Theodore published his masterpiece when he was just 27 years old. Adolphe Theodore's writing brought him notoriety and gave him the moniker Father of Paleobotany. He was also called the Linnaeus of fossil plants. A paleobotanist is someone who works with fossil plants. Plants have been living on our planet for over 400 million years, so there are plenty of fossil plants to study and catalog. Now, Adolphe Theodore was not so much of a fossil plant discoverer as he was a fossil plant organizer. He put fossil plants in order and then applied principles for distinguishing them. In 1841, at the age of 40, Adolphe Theodore received the Wollaston Medal for his work with fossil plants. It's the highest award granted by the Geological Society of London. The honor would have made his geologist father, Alexander, very proud. Adolphe Theodore was a professor at the Paris Museum of Natural History. He was the backfill for André Michaux, who had left to explore the flora of North America. And it was on this day in 1902 that the showy lady's slipper became the state flower of Minnesota. The lady's slipper orchid was discovered in 1789 by the botanist William Ayton. The common name lady's slipper is from the unusual form of the third petal that makes that part of the bloom look like a little shoe. During his lifetime, Charles Darwin repeatedly tried to propagate the lady's slipper orchid. He never succeeded. Now, the growing conditions of the lady slipper are quite particular, which is why they are almost impossible to keep in a traditional garden. And it's also illegal to pick, uproot, or unearth the flowers, which was a problem in the 1800s when people collected them almost to extinction. Since 1925, the lady slipper has been protected by Minnesota state law. In the wild, lady slippers grow in swamps, bogs, and damp woods. They grow for almost a decade before producing their first flower, which can last for up to 2 months in cooler weather. And as long-lived plants, lady slippers can grow to 100 years old and grow up to 4 feet tall. To Native Americans, the lady slipper was known as the moccasin flower. An old Ojibwe legend about the lady slipper told of a plague that had occurred during a harsh winter. Many people had died, including the tribal healer. Desperate for help, a young girl was sent to find medicine. But the snow was deep, and in her haste, she lost her boots and left a trail of bloody footprints in the snow. The legend said that every spring, her footprints were marked with the beautiful moccasin flower. One summer, when Henry David Thoreau came upon a red variety of lady slippers in the woods, he wrote about it, saying, "Everywhere now in dry pitch pine woods stand the red lady slipper over the red pine leaves on the forest floor, rejoicing in June. Behold their rich striped red, their drooping sack." In unearthed words, here are some words about this time of year. This first one's a brief verse from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, the American poet, from his poem called An Afternoon in February. The day is ending, the night is descending, the marsh is frozen, the river is dead. This line is from Patricia Briggs, the American fantasy writer, from her book Dragon's Blood. A man says a lot of things in summer he doesn't mean in winter. And here's a verse from the English Romantic poet William Wordsworth from his poem called To the Same Flower. In this work, he references celandine, or swallowwort. It's a little yellow flower, and in medieval lore, it was believed that mother birds dropped the juice of the celandine into the eyes of their blind little babies. Pleasures newly found are sweet when they lie about our feet. February last, my heart first at sight of thee was glad. All unheard of as thou art, thou must needs, I think, have had celandine, and long ago, praise of which I nothing know. And here's a quote from the American actor and cowboy Will Rogers. I was just thinking, if it is really religion with these nudist colonies, they sure must turn atheists in the wintertime. And finally, here's a little verse from the Jamaican-born English satirical poet George Ellis. The 12 months, snowy, flowy, blowy, showery, flowery, bowery, hoppy, croppy, droppy, breezy, sneezy, freezy. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Beth Chatto's Garden Notebook by Beth Chatto, one of my favorites. Beth's book was a monthly record of everything she did in her garden and her work. Her chapters covered the garden, but also bits from her life. From a personal standpoint, Beth shared her successes as well as her failures. She was a business owner and ran a garden center, and she also showed a garden at Chelsea, which was a tremendous thrill, but also an incredible amount of work. Beth gardened for over 4 decades, and she appreciated the time factor of gardening and the patience required to grow a garden and grow into a good gardener. She wrote, "As certain of our plants take many years to mature, so it takes a long time to grow a genuine plantsman. Those of us who have been at it longest know that one lifetime is not half enough once you become aware of the limitless art of gardening." And here's an excerpt from her chapter on January. Beth's talking about a mass planting of shrubs that appeared less than enticing in her winter landscape. She wrote, "I remember several years ago suddenly feeling very dissatisfied with a group of shrubs which had not faltered when they were full of leaf and for a few weeks blossom during the summer. But now, leafless and with nothing distinguished about their habit of growth, the whole patch looked muddled, formless, and lifeless. By removing some of it, planting a holly and mahonia among the rest, together with vigorous sheaves of the evergreen Iris photodissima citrina nearby, and patches of small-leafed ivies as ground cover, the picture became much more interesting in winter and now forms a better background to the summer carnival which passes before it. In her book, Beth writes in conversation at times with the reader. In January, she asks, "If you look out your favorite window now, are you satisfied with the view? Does it lack design? Would a small-leafed, narrowly pyramidal holly do anything for it? And how many plants can you see which remain green or gray or bronze throughout the winter, furnishing the bare soil at ground level?" Finally, Beth begins her chapter on February with a word about how, for many nursery owners and landscapers, this time of year can feel overwhelming as the full weight of the season's work is anticipated. Beth also acknowledged just how difficult it was for her to write during the garden season. This is a common challenge for garden writers who are too busy gardening in the summer to write, but then can find less inspiration to write in the winter without their gardens. Beth wrote, "This morning I awoke to hear the grandfather clock striking 4 a.m. and was immediately alert, all my present commitments feverishly chasing themselves through my head. Apart from a garden I have foolishly agreed to plan, there is the Chelsea Flower Show nudging more and more insistently as the weeks rush towards May. Usually I have a nucleus of large plants and shrubs in containers that provide an established-looking background, but the sudden severe weather in January has killed off several of my old plants. I have no frost-free place large enough to protect them all. In normal winters, a plastic-covered tunnel has been sufficient." Another commitment is this notebook, which has been fermenting in my mind for several months. I would like to write it to record some of the ups and downs of a nursery garden, but my one fear is not finding time to write decently. Even keeping up a scrappy diary becomes difficult as the sap rises. Ugh, I love this book. You can get a used copy of Beth Chatto's Garden Notebook and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for under $9. And here's today's great gift for a gardener. It's AOMGD's 3-pack macrame plant hangers. And you can get the entire 3-pack featuring 3 different sizes of macrame plant hangers for just $9.89. Macrame has been back in for a while now, but it can get very expensive, especially if you're looking in boutique garden stores or even just gift shops. This pack is great because you get 3 different sizes to use. There's a 46-inch long, a 41-inch long, and a 34-inch long. And you can always make them longer by using common hanging chain, which is what I've done with mine. This 3-pack comes with 3 different hooks. And I will say they're just fine if you're going to put the hooks into wood. But if you're putting them in a sheetrock ceiling, you're going to want to use those toggle bolt hooks that you can get at any big box store. Personally, I love to see macrame in super sunny areas in a home. They just go together, bright sunny windows and macrame. And the fact that this 3-pack comes in white cotton rope is perfect. Your eye will not be distracted by a strange color. The white goes with everything. This is a fun way to jazz up a porch in or outside the house. And it's a nice way to add more plant material at an elevated height. So if you've designated a room in your house to be your indoor conservatory, or if you have a bright corner of your living room that's suddenly become your little indoor plant repository, this little 3-pack might just add the little punch of vertical green that you've been looking for. You can get AOMGD's 3-pack macrame plant hanger plus hooks and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for $9.89. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Even though roses are often associated with February, thanks to Valentine's Day, February's birth flower is not the rose. Instead, February has two birth flowers. In England, February's birth flower is the violet, and in the United States, February is honored with the primrose. With regard to the violet, the plantsman Derek Jarman once wrote, "Violet has the shortest wavelength of the spectrum. Behind it, the invisible ultraviolet. Roses are red, violets are blue. Poor violet, violated for a rhyme." The adorable little violet signifies many virtues: truth and loyalty, watchfulness, and faithfulness. Gifting a violet lets the recipient know you'll always be true. Like the theme song from Friends promises, you'll always be there for them. The ancient Greeks placed a high value on the violet. When it came time to pick a blossom as a symbol for Athens, it was the violet that made the cut. The Greeks used violet to make medicine, and they also used violets in the kitchen to make wine and to eat as edible blossoms. Today, violets are used to decorate salads, and they can even be sprinkled over fish or poultry. And violets are beautiful when candied in sugar or used to decorate pastries. Violets can even be distilled into a syrup for a violet liqueur. Finally, violets were Napoleon Bonaparte's signature flower. When his wife Josephine died in 1814, Napoleon covered her grave with violets. His friends even referred to Napoleon as Corporal Violet. After he was exiled to Elba, Napoleon vowed to return before the violet season. And Napoleon's followers used the violet to weed out his detractors. They would ask strangers if they liked violets, and a positive response was the sign of a loyal Napoleon supporter. The other official February flower is the primrose, which originated from the Latin word primus, meaning first or early. The name refers to the primrose as one of the first plants that bloom in the spring. As with the violet, the leaves and flowers of the primrose are edible and often are tossed into a salad. And the leaves of the primrose are said to taste like lettuce. Gifting a primrose has a more urgent, stalkerish meaning than the violet. A primrose tells a person that you can't live without them. In Germany, people believed that the first girl to find a primrose on Easter would marry that same year. And the saying about leading someone down the primrose path refers to enticing someone to do something bad by laying out pleasurable traps. The phrase originated in William Shakespeare's Hamlet as Ophelia begs her brother, "Do not, as some ungracious pastors do, show me the steep and thorny way to heaven, while like a puffed and reckless libertine, himself the primrose path of dalliance treads." And the man known as the Daffodil King, Peter Barr, bred over 2 million daffodils at his home in Surrey, and he's credited with popularizing the daffodil. Yet when Barr retired, he went to Scotland and grew not daffodils, but primroses. 2 years before he died, Peter Barr, the Daffodil King, mused, "I wonder who will plant my grave with primroses." Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org. And be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.